The house was supposed to be empty. Harper Sterling stood in the doorway of what had once been an elegant foyer, keys still clutched in her trembling hand as amber eyes watched her from the shadows. Not one pair. Not two. At least 6 sets of glowing eyes tracked her every movement from the darkness beyond the boarded windows. You shouldn't have come here. The voice was low, rough with the promise of violence. Harper's hand tightened on the keys to Blackthorne estate as a figure stepped out of the shadows near the grand staircase. A boy, no, a young man, emerged from the darkness like he'd been part of it. 16, maybe 17, with wild dark hair and eyes that glowed amber in the dim light. Everything about him screamed predator, from his coiled stance to the way he moved with fluid, dangerous grace. Ethan, I presume. Harper kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. She'd dealt with plenty of dangerous supernaturals in her line of work, but this felt different. Personal. I'm Harper Sterling. I believe you've been expecting me. The boy, Ethan, laughed, but there was no humor in it. Expecting you? Lady, we've been praying you'd never show up. He took a step down, and Harper caught the fluid grace of a predator in every movement. Turn around. Walk away. Pretend you never got that letter. Can't do that. Harper held up the legal documents she'd been carrying since Boston. Lysander Sterling left me this estate. All of it. That includes you and whoever else is hiding in the shadows. As if summoned by her words, they emerged. 7 more children, ranging from what looked like 6 years old to mid-teens. They appeared from behind furniture, from alcoves, from places Harper hadn't even noticed could hide a person. Silent as ghosts, fierce as wolves. Their clothes were patched and worn, their hair unkempt, but their eyes, God, their eyes held an ancient wariness that broke Harper's heart. We don't belong to anyone, Ethan snarled, moving down another step. The others shifted restlessly behind him, a pack responding to their alpha's agitation. And this place doesn't belong to you. Legal papers mean nothing here. Harper had been appraising supernatural artifacts for 10 years. She knew power when she saw it, knew the weight of old magic and older secrets. But standing in this ruined mansion with 8 feral children who moved like wolves and watched her like prey, she felt completely out of her depth. Look, she said, forcing calm into her voice. I didn't ask for this inheritance. I never even met Lysander Sterling. But I'm here now, and like it or not, we need to figure this out. Figure what out? The voice came from the smallest of the group, a girl who couldn't be more than 6. She had the same amber eyes as the others, the same careful stillness. You're going to send us away. Adults always send us away. The words hit Harper harder than she'd expected. These weren't just supernatural children, they were abandoned supernatural children. And from the look of this place, they'd been fending for themselves for far too long. The mansion told its own story. Elegant bones showed through the decay, soaring ceilings, beautiful woodwork, windows that would have flooded the space with light if they weren't boarded up. But everything was wrong. Furniture overturned and never righted. Walls scarred with more claw marks. Dark stains on the Persian rugs that Harper's enhanced senses identified as blood, old and new. How long since Lysander died? She asked quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. 6 months. Give or take. 6 months. These children had been alone for 6 months, living in this decaying mansion, clearly struggling to survive. Harper's heart clenched as she noticed how thin some of them were, how their clothes hung loose on small frames. There's food in my car, she said. And clean water. When's the last time you had a proper meal? We don't need your charity, Ethan snapped, but Harper caught the way his eyes flickered toward the younger ones. The hunger there. It's not charity. It's... Harper paused, searching for words that wouldn't set off his pride. It's a peace offering. While we figure out what comes next. She started toward the door, then stopped when a low growl rumbled from Ethan's throat. I'm getting supplies from my car, she said evenly. Nothing more. The evening air was crisp against her skin as she stepped outside, grateful for the chance to process what she'd walked into. The Blackthorne estate sprawled across several acres of mountain wilderness, isolated enough that the nearest neighbor was probably 20 miles away. Perfect for a pack of supernatural children who needed space to run free. Harper loaded her arms with the groceries she'd brought for herself, plus the emergency supplies she always carried. As a lone Omega, she'd learned to be prepared for anything. Though nothing had prepared her for this. A sound made her freeze halfway back to the house. Low, mournful, and definitely not human. A howl echoed across the mountains, answered by another from a different direction. Harper's supernatural senses sharpened, trying to pinpoint the source. Not the children. This was something else. Someone else. Another howl, closer this time. Deeper. Adult. Harper hurried back toward the mansion, her arms full of supplies and her mind racing. If there were other werewolves in the area, why weren't they helping the cubs? Why leave 8 children to fend for themselves in a decaying mansion? She found the kids exactly where she'd left them, though they'd moved closer together. Pack behavior, she realized. They were scared too. The howling, she said to Ethan. How often does that happen? His face went carefully blank. Don't know what you're talking about. He was lying. They all were, their eyes sliding away from hers with the transparency of children who hadn't yet learned to lie well. Whatever was out there in the mountains, they knew about it. And they were terrified. Harper set the supplies on what remained of a marble-topped table. There's enough here for tonight. Tomorrow we'll need to talk about long-term arrangements. There won't be a tomorrow, Ethan said quietly. Not for you. It wasn't a threat, Harper realized with a chill. It was a warning. Another howl split the night air, and this time all 8 children flinched. The youngest, the little girl, pressed closer to an older boy who couldn't be more than 10 himself. What happens at night? Harper asked softly. Silence. What are you so afraid of? More silence, but she could see the fear in their eyes now. Raw, desperate terror that no child should ever have to carry. Harper looked around the ruined foyer again, noting details she'd missed before. The way furniture was pushed against certain doors. The heavy curtains that blocked more than just light. The way every entrance she could see had been reinforced with whatever materials they could find. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. And something told her that whatever they were keeping out was far more dangerous than 8 feral children could ever be. Chapter 2. The laptop screen cast an eerie glow in the mansion's library as Harper scrolled through page after page of Supernatural Council records. What she found made her stomach turn cold. Lysander Sterling, banished from the Northern Mountain Pack for unforgivable crimes against nature. Exile permanent. No appeal granted. The file was stamped with official seals, but the details were blacked out. Whatever Lysander had done, it was bad enough that even the Supernatural Council wouldn't put it in writing. You won't find answers there. Harper spun around to find Ethan in the doorway, his amber eyes reflecting the laptop's light like a wild animal's. Despite his human form, everything about him radiated barely contained power. Then tell me yourself, Harper said, closing the laptop. What did Lysander do? Why were you living with him? Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might actually answer. Then his expression shuddered completely. Some things are better left buried. Not when they involve 8 children. Harper stood, frustrated by the walls these kids put up every time she tried to help. Ethan, I can't protect you if I don't know what I'm protecting you from. We don't need protection. But his voice lacked conviction, and Harper caught the way his eyes darted toward the boarded windows. Don't you? Harper gestured toward the makeshift barricades, the reinforced doors. This whole place screams fortress. You're hiding from something. Or someone. Before Ethan could answer, a crash echoed from the kitchen. Harper was moving before she'd even processed the sound, her supernatural senses on high alert. She found 3 of the younger cubs huddled in the corner while 10-year-old Finn stared at his hands in horror. I didn't mean to, Finn whispered, looking at the shattered remains of what had been a heavy ceramic bowl. I got frustrated and I tried to. Harper knelt beside him, noting the way his small hands trembled. Tried to what, sweetheart? Shift, Ethan said quietly from behind her. He tried to shift. Harper's blood chilled. A 10-year-old werewolf should shift easily, as naturally as breathing. The fact that Finn was struggling meant something was very, very wrong. How long? She asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Since Lysander died, Ethan admitted. None of us can shift. Not even me. Cole's point of view. He'd been watching the house for 3 days now, staying downwind and keeping to the deepest shadows of the forest. The woman, Harper, moved through the mansion like she belonged there, which irritated him more than it should have. She was supposed to have run by now. Any sane person would have taken one look at 8 feral cubs and headed straight back to whatever comfortable city life she'd come from. Instead, she'd brought them food, fixed their broken furniture, and was apparently researching Lysander's past. Dangerous. For all of them. Cole shifted position on the tree branch, his enhanced vision tracking Harper as she stepped onto the mansion's back terrace. Even from this distance, he could smell her, warm vanilla and something uniquely omega that made his wolf pace restlessly. He should leave. Should trust that she'd eventually give up and go home, leaving the cubs to his distant protection. But something about the determined set of her shoulders, the gentle way she'd spoken to Finn through the kitchen window, made it impossible to look away. She was trouble. The kind of trouble an alpha like him couldn't afford. A branch snapped behind him, and Cole spun with lethal grace. Nothing. But his instincts screamed danger, the same instincts that had kept him alive through 10 years of exile. They were coming. He could feel it in the change of the wind, the way the forest suddenly seemed too quiet. Harper was out in the open, completely vulnerable, and she had no idea what was hunting her. Harper's point of view. The night air was crisp against Harper's skin as she stepped onto the terrace, desperate for space to think. 8 children who couldn't shift. A dead alpha with a mysterious past. And somewhere in the mountains, howls that made even the cubs tremble with fear. She was in over her head. You shouldn't be out here alone. Harper spun toward the voice, her heart leaping into her throat. A man emerged from the tree line like he'd stepped out of her darkest fantasies, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid power of an apex predator. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that would have been devastatingly handsome if not for the jagged scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. Alpha. Every instinct she possessed screamed the warning. Who are you? Harper demanded, proud that her voice didn't shake. Someone who's trying to keep you alive. He stopped at the edge of the terrace, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his dark eyes. Leave, Harper Sterling. Tonight. Take whatever you can carry and drive until you hit a city with enough people to mask your scent. I'm not going anywhere. The words came out steadier than she felt. Those children need you gone. His voice was rough, edged with barely controlled anger. Every moment you stay here puts them in more danger. From what? From who? Harper stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. Are you the one who's been howling at night? Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or recognition. I'm the one who's been keeping the real monsters away. But I can't protect you and watch the cubs. And they matter more. The casual dismissal of her life should have stung. Instead, Harper found herself oddly touched by his priorities. What's your name? Cole. He said it reluctantly, like giving her that much was already too much. Cole. Harper tasted the name, felt the way it seemed to resonate in her chest. The cubs know you. The cubs are alive because of me. Cole's jaw tightened. Which is more than they'll be if you keep stirring up trouble. What kind of trouble? Harper demanded. What aren't you telling me? For a moment, she thought he might actually answer. The tension between them crackled like electricity, and Harper found herself wanting to step closer, to touch that scarred face and ease whatever pain put such shadows in his eyes. Then Cole stepped back, breaking the spell. "Pack your things, Harper. I won't ask again." "Good," Harper said, lifting her chin. "Because I wouldn't listen anyway." Something that might have been admiration flickered across his features before his expression hardened again. "Then you're going to get us all killed." He melted back into the shadows as suddenly as he'd appeared, leaving Harper alone on the terrace with her racing heart and the uncomfortable certainty that he was right. She was in way over her head. But looking back at the mansion where 8 lost children waited for someone, anyone, to choose them over the easy path, Harper knew she wasn't leaving. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Even if it killed her. Chapter 3. Harper stared at the ancient leather journal she'd found hidden behind a loose stone in the library wall, its pages filled with Lysander Sterling's cramped handwriting. Her hands trembled as she read the final entry, dated just days before his supposed death. The binding is complete. 8 souls tethered to this land, unable to leave without facing true death. They will never escape what they are, what I've made them. The estate owns them now, as surely as if I'd branded my mark into their very souls. Dear God, Harper whispered, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. The cubs weren't just living at the estate, they were trapped here. Prisoners in their own home. You found his journal. Harper spun to find Ethan in the doorway, his young face etched with a weariness that belonged on someone 3 times his age. In the morning light streaming through the library's tall windows, she could see the family resemblance she'd missed before. The same strong jawline, the same amber eyes, the same proud way of holding his shoulders despite everything. "Are you all siblings?" Harper asked softly. Ethan nodded, moving into the room with that careful predator's grace they all shared. "Cole's the oldest. Then me, then Zara, Logan, Finn, the twins Rosa and Rico, and Stella." His voice cracked slightly on the youngest's name. "We were a pack long before Lysander took us." "What happened to your parents?" "Hunters." The word came out flat, emotionless, but Harper caught the flicker of old pain in his eyes. "Cole tried to keep us together, but he was barely 18 and we had nowhere to go. When Lysander offered sanctuary." Ethan shrugged, the gesture heavy with regret. "We thought we were lucky." Harper's heart ached for them. 8 children who'd lost everything, only to fall into the hands of someone worse than the hunters who'd killed their parents. "How long have you been bound to the estate?" 3 years. Ethan moved to the window, staring out at the forest where Harper knew Cole was somewhere watching. "At first, we didn't realize what he'd done. The binding was subtle, just a nagging feeling whenever we got too close to the property line. But then Logan tried to leave." Harper didn't want to ask, but she had to know. "What happened?" "He collapsed about 50 feet past the main gate. Started convulsing, stopped breathing. We got him back to the house just in time." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Lysander laughed. "Said it was a lesson about the price of ingratitude." The casual cruelty of it made Harper's stomach turn. These children had been through hell, and instead of finding safety, they'd found a monster who'd made them his prisoners. "Where's Cole now?" Harper asked. Ethan's expression darkened. "Hunting. He can only take human form at night, so he has to make the most of it. During the day." Ethan gestured toward the forest. "He's stuck as a wolf. Part of Lysander's punishment for trying to protect us." Harper felt like someone had punched her in the chest. The scarred man who'd confronted her last night, who'd tried to send her away to keep her safe, he spent every daylight hour trapped in wolf form. All because he'd tried to save his siblings. "Can the binding be broken?" Harper asked. "Maybe." Ethan's voice was carefully neutral. But Lysander made sure there was a catch. "If someone tries to break the binding incorrectly, or if we're too far from the estate when it happens." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Harper sank into one of the library's leather chairs, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she'd walked into. 8 children bound to a cursed estate by a madman's magic. Their older brother cursed to live half his life as a wolf. And somewhere in these mountains, threats that even Cole couldn't fully protect them from. Harper? The tiny voice came from the doorway. Harper looked up to see Stella, the youngest of the cubs, clutching a battered stuffed rabbit. Even at 6 years old, she had the same amber eyes as her siblings, but hers held a sweetness that the others had lost. "Hi, sweetheart," Harper said gently, pushing aside her dark thoughts. "Did you sleep okay?" Stella padded into the room, her bare feet silent on the Persian rug. "I had bad dreams again." "About the alpha." "What alpha, baby?" Harper held out her arms, and Stella climbed into her lap without hesitation. The little girl's trust was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. "The bad alpha," Stella said matter-of-factly, snuggling against Harper's chest. "The one who hurt Cole. He said he'd come back for us when he was done sleeping." Harper exchanged a sharp look with Ethan over Stella's head. "Stella, honey, when did the bad alpha tell you this?" "In my dreams," Stella said. "But they're not really dreams. He talks to all of us sometimes, when we're sleeping. Says we're his cubs now and we'll never leave him." Harper's blood turned to ice. If Lysander was communicating with the children through dreams, that meant. "Ethan, when did Lysander die?" 6 months ago, Ethan said automatically, then his eyes widened as he caught her meaning. "But if he's still reaching the cubs?" "He's not dead," Harper finished. "He can't be." Before either of them could process that terrifying revelation, a commotion erupted from the kitchen. Shouts, the crash of breaking dishes, and underneath it all, a sound that made Harper's supernatural senses scream warnings, the low, pained growl of an injured predator. Harper was moving before she'd fully processed the sounds, Stella still in her arms. She found the other cubs clustered around the kitchen's back door, their faces pale with fear. Through the open doorway, Harper could see a massive black wolf limping across the estate's back lawn, leaving a trail of blood in the grass. "Cole," Ethan breathed. Harper handed Stella to Zara and was out the door before anyone could stop her. The wolf, Cole, had collapsed near the tree line, his dark fur matted with blood from multiple wounds. Harper dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his injuries. "What happened?" she asked, though she wasn't sure if he could understand her in wolf form. The wolf's dark eyes met hers, and Harper saw the intelligence there, the frustration of being trapped in a form that couldn't speak. Carefully, she ran her hands over his injuries, cataloging the damage. Claw marks across his ribs, a deep bite on his shoulder, multiple smaller cuts that spoke of a vicious fight. "We need to get you inside," Harper said. "Can you make it to the house?" The wolf tried to stand, stumbled, and Harper made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. She slipped her arms under the massive animal, using her supernatural strength to help support his weight. "Come on," she murmured. "Let me help." Together, they made it to the mansion's back terrace. The cubs had cleared a space in what had once been a sunroom, laying out blankets and gathering supplies with the efficiency of children who'd done this before. "He'll change back at sunset," Ethan said quietly. "That's still hours away." Harper nodded, settling beside the injured wolf. "Then we wait." The afternoon passed in tense silence. Harper stayed by Cole's side, keeping pressure on the worst of his wounds and murmuring soft reassurances whenever he stirred restlessly. The cubs took turns bringing her water and food she didn't touch, their worried eyes never leaving their brother. As the sun began to set, Harper felt the change begin. It started as a shimmer in the air around the wolf, a sense of power gathering. Then the transformation began, painful, Harper realized, especially with his injuries. Bones lengthening, fur receding, until finally Cole lay human on the blankets, breathing hard and covered in sweat. And completely naked. Harper's breath caught in her throat. She'd thought he was impressive in clothes, but seeing him like this, all lean muscle and dangerous power, scars crisscrossing his chest like a map of old battles, made her mouth go dry. "See something you like?" Cole's voice was rough with pain, but there was amusement in his dark eyes. Harper felt heat flood her cheeks. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm just making sure you're not bleeding to death. Liar. But he said it without heat, and when she reached for the first aid kit Ethan had brought, he didn't protest. Harper worked in silence, cleaning and bandaging his wounds with steady hands. This close, she could smell his scent, pine and rain, and something uniquely male that made her wolf purr with interest. Dangerous territory, especially when Cole was injured and vulnerable. What attacked you? Harper asked, focused on the claw marks across his ribs. Scouts, Cole said grimly. Testing our defenses. They're getting bolder. Scouts for who? Cole's jaw tightened. You don't want to know. Stop protecting me, Harper said sharply, pressing a little harder than necessary on a particularly deep cut. I'm not some helpless city girl who's going to faint at the first sign of danger. These children are my responsibility now, which means their enemies are my enemies. Cole studied her face for a long moment. You really mean that? Every word. Then you should know, Lysander had allies. Other alphas who shared his appetites. They've been circling ever since word got out about the inheritance, waiting to see if whoever took the estate would be easy prey. Harper's hands stilled on his bandages. And they've decided you're weak enough to take. Cole's eyes met hers. They want the cubs, Harper. Want to finish what Lysander started. Before Harper could ask what he meant, Stella appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. Cole? The little girl's face lit up when she saw her brother in human form. You're okay. Hey, little moon, Cole said softly, and Harper's heart clenched at the gentleness in his voice. Come here. Stella launched herself at him, and Cole winced as she landed on his injured ribs. Harper started to intervene, but stopped when she saw the way he folded his arms around his youngest sister, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I missed you, Stella said, then looked up at Harper with solemn eyes. Harper's been taking care of us. She fixed the broken window in my room and made pancakes that actually taste good. Did she now? Cole's gaze flicked to Harper, something unreadable in his expression. And she reads really good bedtime stories. Stella settled more comfortably against her brother's chest. I like her. Can we keep her? Stella, Cole started. She could be our new mama, Stella continued innocently. The bad alpha said he'd come back for us, but maybe if we have a new mama, he can't take us away. Harper saw Cole go completely still. Stella, what did you say about the bad alpha? He talks to us sometimes, Stella said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. In our dreams. He says he's just sleeping and when he wakes up, we'll be his cubs forever. But I don't want to be his cub. I want Harper to be my mama. The words hit Harper like a physical blow. This innocent child, who'd already lost so much, was looking at her with such hope, such trust. And somewhere in this cursed estate, the monster who'd trapped them all was still alive, still reaching out to claim them. Stella, Harper said gently, can you show me where you have these dreams? Is there a special place where you hear the bad alpha's voice? Stella nodded solemnly. In the basement. The dreams are strongest there. But we're not supposed to go down there. Lysander said it was dangerous. Harper's blood chilled. A basement she hadn't found in her exploration of the estate. A place where Lysander's presence was strongest, where he could reach the children even in sleep. Cole, Harper said quietly, there's something I need to tell you about Lysander. His eyes sharpened. What? I don't think he's dead. Harper's words fell into the room like stones into still water. I think he's hiding somewhere in this estate, and I think I know where. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Cole was moving, despite his injuries, gathering Stella into his arms and standing in one fluid motion. We're leaving, he said flatly. All of us. Tonight. We can't, Ethan said from the doorway, where he'd been listening. The binding. Then we'll die free rather than live as his prisoners, Cole snarled. No. Harper stood, meeting Cole's fierce gaze with determination. We're not running. We're going to end this. Harper. These children have been running and hiding for 3 years, Harper said firmly. They deserve better. They deserve to be free, truly free, not just trading one cage for another. And if trying to break the binding kills them? Harper looked around the room at the 8 faces watching her, 7 children and 1 man who'd sacrificed everything to protect them. They were her pack now, whether any of them had planned it or not. Then we'll find another way, Harper said. But first, we're going to pay a visit to the basement. It's time to wake sleeping monsters. Cole's eyes burned with something between admiration and terror. You have no idea what you're suggesting. Then you better fill me in, Harper said, already moving toward the door. Because one way or another, this ends tonight. Behind them, Stella's small voice carried a chilling certainty. The bad alpha is waking up. I can feel him stirring. Harper's resolve hardened. If Lysander Sterling wanted a fight, she'd give him one. But this time, he'd face an Omega who had everything to lose, and a family worth fighting for. Chapter 4. Cole's point of view. The hidden entrance to the basement was concealed behind a false wall in the mansion's wine cellar, accessible only by pressing a specific sequence of stones that Harper somehow knew without hesitation. Cole watched her work with growing unease, noting the way her fingers moved across the ancient symbols carved into the rock as if guided by muscle memory. How did you know the pattern? He asked as the wall swung inward with a grinding of centuries-old mechanisms. Harper paused, her hand still on the stone. I'm not sure. It just felt right. She looked up at him with confusion clouding her amber eyes. That's strange, isn't it? Strange didn't begin to cover it. Cole's wolf was pacing restlessly, every instinct screaming warnings he couldn't quite name. The air that wafted up from the hidden staircase carried scents that made his stomach turn, old magic, preserved death, and underneath it all, something that reminded him unervingly of Harper's own sweet scent. Maybe we should wait, Cole said, though he knew they couldn't. Stella's fever had spiked an hour ago, and Finn was now showing the same symptoms, a burning temperature that their supernatural healing couldn't touch, accompanied by a listlessness that spoke of life force being slowly drained away. We can't. Harper's voice was steady, but Cole could smell her fear. Whatever's down there is connected to what's happening to the cubs. Every hour we wait makes them weaker. She was right, and they both knew it. Still, as they descended the narrow stone steps into darkness that seemed to swallow their flashlight beams, Cole found himself wishing he could shield Harper from whatever they were about to discover. The need to protect her had become a constant ache in his chest, growing stronger every moment they spent together. The staircase ended in a circular chamber carved from living rock, its walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Ancient magic, the kind that came with a terrible price. But it was what dominated the center of the room that made Cole's blood freeze in his veins. A crystal chamber, roughly the size of a coffin, filled with swirling silver mist that moved with unnatural purpose. And suspended within that mist, perfectly preserved as if he'd only just laid down to sleep, was Lysander Sterling. Jesus, Harper breathed, stepping closer despite Cole's instinctive move to hold her back. He looks exactly like his portrait upstairs. Cole studied the face of the man who'd tormented his family for 3 years. Even in magical sleep, Lysander's features held a cruel beauty, sharp cheekbones, dark hair shot with silver, and a mouth that seemed to curve in perpetual disdain. But it was his hands that drew Cole's attention, pressed against the crystal walls of his prison. The same long fingers, the same elegant bone structure, that he'd noticed in Harper's graceful gestures. Harper, Cole said slowly, a terrible suspicion beginning to form. Look at his hands. She glanced down at her own hands, then back at Lysander's, and Cole saw the exact moment understanding hit her. The similarity was unmistakable, the same narrow wrists, the same long fingers, even the same way the pinky curved slightly inward. No, Harper whispered, backing away from the chamber. That's not, it can't be. Before Cole could respond, Harper's foot struck something on the floor. A leather-bound journal, one of dozens scattered around the base of the stasis chamber. Harper picked it up with trembling hands, and Cole read over her shoulder as she opened to a random page. Day 847 of the experiment. The binding grows stronger. Subject 7 shows remarkable adaptation to the life force transfer, though her wolf remains stubborn. Note: increase binding intensity during next moon cycle. The others watch her with growing concern. Excellent. Fear makes them more compliant. Addendum: received word from my contact in Boston. The child has been placed successfully. She'll never know what she is until I'm ready to bring her home. My greatest creation should be raised far from here, kept pure until she's needed. Harper's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the journal. The child, she whispered. He's talking about a child he placed in Boston. Cole's wolf was howling now, a sound of pure anguish that had nothing to do with his own pain. Harper, where were you born? Boston. The word came out barely audible. I was adopted. The agency said my birth parents died in an accident when I was 6 months old. Another journal caught Cole's eye, this one bound in dark leather and locked with silver clasps. He broke the lock easily, his supernatural strength making quick work of the delicate mechanism. The pages inside were filled with detailed drawings and notes that made his stomach churn. Diagrams of binding rituals. Maps of life force pathways. And sketched portraits of dozens of children, all with the same amber eyes, all marked with dates and locations and notes about their compatibility ratings. He was collecting us, Cole said, his voice rough with suppressed rage. Not just my siblings. Children from packs all over the country. Building some kind of supernatural breeding program. Harper turned pages in her own journal, her face growing paler with every entry. Listen to this, she said, her voice hollow. Subject 7 proves most promising. The daughter possesses the perfect combination of omega compliance and alpha power. When she reaches maturity, she will serve as the cornerstone of the new order. Through her, all others will be bound not just to place, but to purpose. Subject 7, Cole repeated. 7 children in your adoptive family? No. Harper's eyes met his, wide with dawning horror. 7 Omega children he'd been tracking. I was the 7th one he found. The one he decided to keep. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Lysander hadn't just randomly left Harper the estate. She was his daughter, his greatest creation, bred specifically for this moment. And now that she was here, now that she'd claimed her inheritance, the binding magic was responding to her presence like a key turning in a lock. That's why the cubs are getting sicker, Cole realized aloud. Your presence here isn't just activating the existing bindings, it's strengthening them. You're the missing piece he needed to make his experiment permanent. Harper sank onto the stone floor, the journal falling from her nerveless fingers. I'm killing them. Just by being here, I'm killing them. No. Cole was beside her in an instant, pulling her against his chest. This isn't your fault. You didn't know. But now I do. Harper's voice was muffled against his shirt. And if I stay, they'll die. But if I leave, the binding will kill them anyway, Cole finished grimly. He designed it that way. You're not just the key to strengthening the bonds, you're the only one who can break them. They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the evidence of Lysander's atrocities. Cole could feel Harper trembling against him, and every protective instinct he possessed roared to life. She'd walked into this nightmare blind, trying to help children she'd never met, and now she was trapped just as surely as the rest of them. There has to be another way, Harper said finally. Someone put him in that stasis chamber. Someone with power equal to his own. Maybe they left instructions, or... She was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his young face grim with worry. Cole, you need to come now, he said. Stella's getting worse. Her temperature's spiking and she's asking for Harper. Harper was on her feet before Ethan finished speaking. We'll figure this out later, she said, already moving toward the stairs. Right now, those children need us. They found Stella in the mansion's main bedroom, surrounded by her siblings. The little girl was burning with fever, her small body racked with tremors that spoke of a system under attack. But when she saw Harper, her eyes brightened with desperate hope. "Harper," Stella whispered, reaching out with a shaky hand. "I dreamed about the bad alpha again. He was angry. Said you were supposed to come home sooner." Harper knelt beside the bed, taking Stella's hot little hand in both of hers. "I'm here now, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" Stella's amber eyes, so like Lysander's, Cole realized with a sick lurch, searched Harper's face. "I promise," Harper said firmly. Over the next few hours, they took turns keeping vigil over Stella while Finn's condition continued to deteriorate. Harper read stories, sang lullabies, and somehow managed to keep her voice steady even as Cole could smell her growing desperation. It was near dawn when Stella's fever finally broke. The little girl slipped into peaceful sleep for the first time in days, and Harper slumped with exhaustion in the chair beside the bed. "Get some rest," Cole said quietly. "I'll watch her. I can't sleep." Harper's voice was hoarse from hours of storytelling. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those journals. All those children he hurt, all those families he destroyed." "Look at me," Cole said, moving to kneel beside her chair. When Harper's tired eyes met his, he cupped her face gently in his hands. "You are not him. Whatever twisted genetics you might share, whatever sick plans he had for you, you are nothing like him." "How can you be sure?" Harper's voice broke on the words. "What if it's in my blood? What if I'm capable of the same things?" "Because," Cole said, stroking his thumbs across her cheekbones, "you've spent the last week putting yourself in danger to protect children who aren't even yours. Because you're here, exhausted and heartbroken, watching over a little girl's sickbed instead of running from a nightmare that isn't your fault." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "Cole. Because," he continued, leaning closer, "you're the bravest person I've ever met. And I..." He stopped himself before he could say the words that burned in his throat. It was too soon, too complicated, too dangerous to put that kind of pressure on either of them. But Harper seemed to understand anyway. Her hand came up to cover his, and she leaned into his touch like a flower turning towards sunlight. "Cole," she whispered. This time, there was no hesitation. Cole closed the distance between them, capturing her lips in a kiss that was gentle and desperate and full of everything he couldn't yet say. Harper's response was immediate, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with a passion that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Harper rested her forehead against his. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "We're going to find a way to break those bindings without getting anyone killed," Cole said with more confidence than he felt. "And we're going to make sure Lysander never hurts another child." "What if we can't?" Cole pressed another soft kiss to her lips. "Then we'll face whatever comes together. All of us." It was a promise he intended to keep, even if it killed him. Because somewhere in the space of a week, this brave, beautiful woman had become as essential to him as breathing. She was his mate, he'd known it from the moment he'd caught her scent on the mountain air. And he'd be damned if he'd let Lysander's sick legacy destroy their chance at happiness. But first, they had to figure out who had put Lysander in magical stasis, and why. Because Cole had a sinking feeling that their mysterious benefactor might not be as benevolent as they hoped. In the bed beside them, Stella stirred in her sleep, a small smile crossing her fevered features. "Mama," she mumbled, her small hand reaching toward Harper. "Don't let the bad alpha take us away." Harper caught the little girl's hand, holding it gently. "Never," she whispered. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again." As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Cole found himself believing that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Whatever Lysander had planned, whatever trap he'd laid, they would find a way through it. They had to. Because the alternative, losing Harper, losing the cubs, losing this unexpected family they'd built, was unthinkable. The war for their freedom was just beginning, but for the first time since this nightmare started, Cole felt like they might actually win. Chapter 5. Harper's point of view. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's tall windows as Harper stood in the main living room, facing 8 pairs of amber eyes that refused to meet her gaze. The cubs were arranged in their usual protective formation, the older ones in front, the younger ones behind, but for the first time since she'd arrived, they looked guilty. "You knew," Harper said quietly, her voice carrying across the room with deadly calm. "All of you. You knew exactly who I was before I ever set foot in this house." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Behind him, the younger cubs shifted restlessly, their supernatural hearing no doubt picking up on Harper's barely contained emotions. "How long?" Harper asked when no one answered. "How long have you known that Lysander Sterling was my biological father?" "Since the lawyer's letter arrived 6 months ago," Ethan admitted finally. "Lysander made sure we understood exactly who would be inheriting the estate and why." The words hit Harper like a physical blow. 6 months. They'd had 6 months to prepare for her arrival, 6 months to decide how to handle the daughter of the monster who'd imprisoned them. And they'd chosen to lie. "He told us you were his special project," Zara said, speaking up for the first time. At 14, she was usually the most outspoken of the cubs after Ethan, but now her voice was small, uncertain. "Said you'd been raised away from here so you'd be pure when you came home." "Pure," Harper repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. What did he mean by that? "Untainted by pack politics," Ethan explained. Lysander believed most werewolves were corrupted by traditional pack structures. He wanted to create something new, something better. And you were supposed to be the cornerstone of his vision. Harper felt sick. Even from magical stasis, Lysander was still pulling strings, still manipulating lives from beyond the grave. "Is that why you threatened me that first day? Because you thought I was here to finish his work?" "We were scared," Stella said in a small voice, stepping out from behind her older siblings. "Lysander said his daughter would make us do terrible things. But you're not terrible. You're nice." The simple declaration from the 6-year-old nearly broke Harper's heart. These children had been living in terror, not just of their captor, but of her, the daughter they'd been told would complete their enslavement. "I would never hurt you," Harper said, kneeling down to Stella's level. "Any of you. You have to know that." "We know that now," Ethan said quietly. "But at first, you thought I was as much of a monster as he is." Harper stood, facing the older boy who'd become the de facto leader of their little pack. "What changed your mind?" "You stayed," Ethan said simply. "When Cole warned you to leave, when we gave you every reason to run, you stayed. Lysander never told us his daughter would choose us over her own safety." The words should have been comforting, but Harper caught the undercurrent of uncertainty in Ethan's voice. But nothing's changed, has it?" Ethan's amber eyes met hers with painful honesty. "You're still his daughter. You're still here to complete the binding. The only difference is that now you're trying to fight it instead of embrace it." Harper opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Because as much as she hated to admit it, Ethan was right. She was Lysander's daughter, bred specifically for this purpose. And despite her best intentions, her presence here was slowly killing the children she'd come to love. "There's something else," Harper said after a moment. "Something I learned from his journals. My mother, she wasn't just any werewolf. She was a witch." The cubs exchanged glances, and Harper caught the flicker of something that might have been hope in their eyes. "What kind of witch?" Finn asked, speaking up from where he sat curled against Logan's side. The 10-year-old was still weak from his recent fever, but his eyes were sharp with interest. "I don't know yet," Harper admitted. "But it explains why Lysander's binding magic responds to me differently than he expected. I'm not just an Omega, I'm something else entirely." Before anyone could respond, the sound of a car engine echoed from the estate's front drive. Harper moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boards to see an elegant black sedan pulling up to the mansion's front steps. "Who is that?" Cole's voice came from behind her. Harper hadn't heard him approach, but she wasn't surprised. Since their kiss last night, he'd been staying close, as if his protective instincts had shifted into overdrive. "I have no idea," Harper said, watching as the car's driver door opened. But whoever it is, they know exactly where they're going. The woman who emerged from the sedan was striking in the way that only comes from generations of good breeding and expensive maintenance. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a perfect chignon and clothes that probably cost more than Harper made in a month. She moved toward the mansion with the confidence of someone who owned everything in sight. Natasha, Ethan breathed, and Harper caught the fear in his voice. You know her? Harper asked. Natasha Sterling, Cole said grimly. Lysander's business partner. If she's here, it means trouble. The knock on the front door was crisp, authoritative, the sound of someone who expected to be obeyed. Harper glanced around at the cubs, noting the way they'd automatically moved into defensive positions, the older ones shielding the younger. Stay here, Harper told them, then looked at Cole. With me? He nodded, falling into step beside her as they made their way to the front door. Harper could feel the cubs following at a distance, unwilling to be separated from their protectors. When Harper opened the door, Natasha Sterling's cool blue gaze swept over her with the efficiency of a predator cataloging prey. Her smile was perfectly polished and completely without warmth. Harper Sterling, Natasha said, her voice carrying the faint trace of an accent Harper couldn't place. How lovely to finally meet you. I'm Natasha Sterling, a dear friend of your father's. My father is dead, Harper said flatly. Natasha's smile widened. Oh, my dear. We both know that's not entirely true, don't we? She stepped forward, clearly expecting to be invited in. When Harper didn't move aside, Natasha's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. May I come in? We have a great deal to discuss. Every instinct Harper possessed screamed warnings, but she stepped aside anyway. Better to face this threat head-on than let it fester in uncertainty. Natasha swept into the mansion's foyer with the air of someone reclaiming familiar territory. Her gaze took in the boarded windows, the makeshift fortifications, the obvious signs of children living in survival mode, and her perfectly sculpted lips tightened with disapproval. Really, Cole, she said, turning to face the man who'd moved to flank Harper's other side. Is this how you've been caring for Lysander's children? Like wild animals in a cave? They're not his children, Cole snarled, and Harper could see his control fraying at the edges. They're prisoners he collected. And they're better off as wild animals than as his toys. Such dramatic language, Natasha said with a dismissive wave. But then, you always did have a tendency toward melodrama. It's what got you cursed in the first place. Harper felt Cole tense beside her, his wolf pressing close to the surface. Careful, Natasha. Or what? Natasha's smile turned predatory. You'll attack me? We both know you're not capable of harming me, dear boy. The binding won't allow it. The binding. Harper's blood chilled as she realized what Natasha was implying. You're bound to Lysander too. Not bound, exactly, Natasha said, finally turning her attention fully to Harper. More of a partnership. One that's protected both of us quite well over the years. You put him in stasis, Harper said, the pieces clicking into place. You're the one who prevented him from completing his plan. Temporarily, Natasha corrected. I simply felt the children needed more time to adjust before the final phase of Lysander's vision was implemented. But now that you're here, we can move forward. Move forward with what? Natasha moved deeper into the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. With creating the perfect supernatural society, of course. A world where power is properly distributed, where the strongest rule and the weakest serve their betters. Your father was a visionary, Harper. It would be a shame to let his work die with him. His work was torture, Harper said, her voice rising. He imprisoned children, experimented on them, turned them into magical batteries for his sick fantasies. He was creating order from chaos, Natasha said sharply. Do you have any idea what the supernatural world looked like before visionaries like your father began implementing control measures? Pacts at war, territories constantly shifting, children dying because their parents were too weak or too sentimental to make the hard choices. The hard choices? Cole stepped forward, his body vibrating with barely leashed violence. Like cursing an 18-year-old to spend half his life as a wolf because he tried to protect his siblings? Like teaching you that there are consequences for defying your betters, Natasha said coolly. You're stronger now, more focused. The curse made you into the perfect guardian for these children. Harper felt something stir inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with power. For a moment, the air around her seemed to shimmer, and she could swear she saw threads of silver light connecting Natasha to something dark and twisted in the mansion's depths. You're still connected to him, Harper said, the knowledge coming to her with startling clarity. The stasis chamber. You're the one maintaining it. Natasha's eyes sharpened. Clever girl. Yes, I've been keeping your father in magical suspension while we waited for you to mature. But the spell requires constant maintenance, and I'm growing tired of the effort. So wake him up, Harper said. Break the stasis and let him face the consequences of what he's done. Oh, but I can't do that, Natasha said with mock regret. You see, the binding that holds these children to the estate is connected to Lysander's life force. If he dies, truly dies, they die with him. But if he wakes before the binding is properly transferred to you. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Harper could see the trap now, laid out with elegant simplicity. Keep Lysander in stasis forever, and Natasha remained in control. Wake him up prematurely, and the cubs died. But transfer the binding to Harper. You want me to take his place, Harper realized. Become the anchor point for the magic that's holding them prisoner. Holding them safe, Natasha corrected. Do you have any idea how many supernatural children go missing every year? How many end up dead because their parents couldn't protect them? Here, they have security. Purpose. A chance to become something greater than they ever could have been running wild. They have a prison, Harper said flatly. They have a home, Natasha countered. One that could be truly beautiful with the right guidance. Your guidance. Harper felt the cubs moving closer behind her, could smell their fear and desperation. They were caught between Natasha's promises of safety and Harper's offer of freedom, and both options seemed equally likely to get them killed. There is, of course, another option, Natasha said, her voice taking on a deceptively casual tone. You could simply sign the estate over to me and walk away. I'll maintain the status quo, keep the children safe and comfortable, and you can return to your nice, normal life in Boston. And if I refuse? Natasha's smile turned arctic. Then you'll discover just how much of your father's ruthlessness you've inherited. Because one way or another, these children will be properly cared for. The only question is whether you'll be part of the solution or part of the problem that needs to be eliminated. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Harper could feel Cole's tension ratcheting higher, could hear the cubs' breathing growing shallow with fear. Natasha had played her hand, and now they all had to live with the consequences. Harper, Stella's small voice came from behind her. Don't leave us. Please don't leave us with her. Harper turned to see all 8 cubs watching her with desperate eyes. These children who'd been lied to, manipulated, and imprisoned were still willing to trust her. Still believed she might be able to save them. I'm not going anywhere, Harper said firmly, then turned back to Natasha. The estate stays with me. The children stay with me. You can take your offer and... Careful, dear, Natasha interrupted. You're still very new to this world. There are powers at play here that you don't understand. Forces that have been in motion far longer than your brief existence. As if to prove her point, Harper felt that strange warmth in her chest again, stronger this time. The silver threads she'd glimpsed before became clearer, and she could see the magical bonds that held the cubs like chains made of moonlight and shadow. But more than that, she could feel them, each strand of power, each point of connection, each place where the magic was wearing thin or growing stronger. I can see them, Harper whispered, wonder and horror mixing in her voice. The bonds. I can actually see the magic holding them here. Natasha's composure cracked for the first time since she'd arrived. That's impossible. The sight shouldn't manifest for years yet, and only if you've embraced your full inheritance. But Harper was no longer listening. She was staring at the cubs, seeing for the first time the true extent of what had been done to them. Silver chains wrapped around their hearts, their souls, their very essence. Some of the bonds were fraying, particularly around Finn and Stella, while others blazed with malevolent strength. And all of them led back to the basement, to the chamber where Lysander waited in his magical sleep. "They're dying," Harper said, her voice hollow with realization. "Not slowly, not eventually. They're dying right now. The bonds are consuming them from the inside out." Natasha's mask slipped entirely, revealing something cold and calculating beneath the elegant facade. "Which is why we need to complete the transfer immediately. Sign the papers, Harper. Accept your inheritance fully, and save their lives. Or," Harper said, power crackling around her like electricity, "I could just break the bonds myself." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Natasha's face went white, and even Cole stepped back, sensing the dangerous shift in Harper's energy. "You don't know what you're doing," Natasha said, her voice tight with fear. "One wrong move and you'll kill them all." "Maybe," Harper agreed. "But at least they'll die free." The standoff stretched between them, two women facing each other across a chasm of opposing philosophies. Natasha representing the old ways, the safe ways, the ways that traded freedom for security. Harper representing something newer, more dangerous, more uncertain. And in the balance hung the lives of 8 children who'd already lost everything once. Harper could feel the magic building around her, responding to her emotions, her will, her desperate need to protect the family she'd found. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be both wolf and witch, Omega and something far more powerful. The question was whether she was strong enough to save them all, or whether trying would destroy everything she'd come to love. Natasha raised her hand, and Harper saw silver light gathering around her fingers. "Last chance, dear. Sign the papers, or I'll be forced to take more direct action." Harper's answer was to let her own power flare, the air around her shimmering with golden light that made the cubs gasp in wonder and Natasha curse in what sounded like ancient Latin. The battle for their freedom was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 7. Harper's point of view. The golden light exploding from Harper's hands met Natasha's silver magic in a collision that shook the mansion's foundations. Plaster rained from the ceiling as the two forces clashed, neither able to gain the upper hand. But Harper could feel her strength already beginning to wane. She was powerful, but Natasha had centuries of experience. "Enough of this," Natasha snarled, and suddenly her attack shifted. Instead of meeting Harper's power head-on, she redirected her energy downward, toward the basement. Harper felt the change immediately through her connection to the estate. The bonds holding the cubs grew tighter, their silver threads pulsing with malevolent energy that made the children cry out in pain. "The ritual chamber," Natasha said with vicious satisfaction. "Did you really think we could conduct this little dance anywhere else? The true work requires the proper tools." Before Harper could respond, the floor beneath their feet began to glow with the same silver light that surrounded Natasha. Ancient symbols carved into the wooden boards became visible, forming a complex pattern that extended throughout the entire mansion. The whole house is one massive ritual circle, Harper realized with growing horror. Clever girl. Lysander designed it that way. Every room, every hallway, every broken floorboard carefully positioned to channel magical energy toward the chamber below. Natasha's smile was triumphant. "And now that you've activated your inheritance, now that you're fully bound to the estate, the circle is complete." Harper felt the truth of it like ice in her veins. Every step she'd taken in this house, every moment she'd spent caring for the cubs, every decision to stay and fight, it had all been feeding power into Natasha's ritual. She hadn't been protecting the children, she'd been inadvertently helping to kill them. "Don't blame yourself too harshly," Natasha said, apparently reading Harper's expression. Lysander was always better at the long game than most people gave him credit for. He knew exactly what kind of person would inherit his estate, exactly how they would react to finding the children. Your very compassion was part of the trap. Around them, the mansion began to change. Walls became translucent, revealing the true magical structure beneath. Harper could see the cubs in the kitchen, their forms outlined in silver light that pulsed with each beat of their hearts. The bonds connecting them to the estate were no longer invisible threads, they were chains of pure energy, growing brighter and more oppressive by the moment. "It's time," Natasha announced, and began descending toward the basement. Not through the door, the floor simply opened beneath her feet, creating a spiral staircase of crystallized light. "Come along, dear. The ritual requires your participation, willing or not." Harper had no choice but to follow. The magical energy surrounding her was like a current, pulling her inexorably downward. She could feel Cole and the cubs trying to reach her, but they were blocked by walls of silver light that had materialized throughout the house. The basement chamber had been transformed. The rough stone walls now gleamed like polished marble, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when Harper wasn't looking directly at them. Lysander's stasis chamber stood at the center of it all, the crystal coffin pulsing with the same rhythm as the cubs' heartbeats. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Natasha gestured to the transformed space with obvious pride. 3 centuries of planning, coming to fruition at last. Harper forced herself to focus past the overwhelming magical energy. There had to be a way out of this, some weakness in Natasha's plan she could exploit. Her eyes fell on the scattered journals still lying around the chamber's perimeter, Lysander's research into binding magic and life force manipulation. "You have a choice to make," Natasha continued, moving to stand beside the stasis chamber. "I can complete the ritual now, draining the cubs slowly while you watch, taking their power bit by bit until there's nothing left. Or..." She paused dramatically, clearly enjoying Harper's growing desperation. "Or you can participate willingly. Help me channel their life force cleanly, quickly. I promise their deaths will be painless, and when it's over, you'll have enough residual power to make me pay for what I've done." The offer hung in the air like a poisoned apple. Harper could see the trap within the trap. Even if she gained enough power to kill Natasha, it would come at the cost of 8 innocent lives. The children who'd called her mama, who'd trusted her to protect them, would be dead by her own hand. "Think about it," Natasha pressed. "Wouldn't it be better to give them a clean death and then ensure I can never hurt anyone else? How many more children will I kill over the centuries if you don't stop me now?" Harper's hands clenched into fists. Natasha was right, in her twisted way. This might be the only chance to end her reign of terror permanently. But the cost. A crash from above interrupted her thoughts. Through the magical barriers, Harper could see Cole in his wolf form, throwing himself against the silver walls with desperate fury. His dark fur was already singed from the magical energy, but he kept attacking, kept trying to reach her. "Touching," Natasha said with mock sympathy. "But pointless. The barriers will hold until the ritual is complete." Another crash, and this time Harper saw cracks appear in the silver wall. Cole's determination was literally breaking through Natasha's magic, though it was clearly costing him. "Impossible," Natasha breathed, then her expression hardened. "Very well. If he insists on interfering." She raised her hand, and the symbols on the chamber walls flared with blinding light. Harper felt the change immediately. The magical pressure in the room doubled, then tripled. The bonds connecting her to the cubs grew so tight she could barely breathe. Above them, Cole's wolf form crashed through the barrier in an explosion of silver sparks. He hit the basement floor hard, transforming to human form as he rolled to absorb the impact. But Harper could see the cost. His skin was covered in burns from the magical energy, and blood trickled from his mouth. "Cole, no." Harper started toward him, but Natasha's power held her in place. "How wonderfully dramatic," Natasha said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The noble hero, sacrificing himself for love. Though I'm afraid it changes nothing." She gestured, and creatures began materializing from the shadows, things that might once have been human but were now twisted into nightmare shapes. Shadow creatures, Harper realized, bound to Natasha's will through the same type of magic that held the cubs. "Kill him," Natasha commanded, and the creatures lunged. Cole met their attack with the fluid grace of a predator, but Harper could see he was already weakened from breaking through the barriers. He couldn't fight them all, not in his condition. Above them, the sound of running feet echoed through the mansion. The cubs were coming, drawn by the magical chaos and their desperate need to help their brother. "No," Harper whispered, watching Ethan appear at the top of the basement stairs, the other cubs close behind. "They're too weak, they can't." But they were already moving, the older cubs shifting partially despite their magical injuries. Not full transformations, the binding magic wouldn't allow that, but enough to give them claws and fangs and the speed to dodge the shadow creature's attacks. Harper watched in agonized pride as her makeshift family fought for their lives. Stella, barely 6 years old, staying behind the others but ready to run if needed. The twins, Rosa and Rico, moving in perfect synchronization despite being only 9. Finn, still weak from his recent fever, throwing himself at a shadow creature twice his size to protect Zara. They were magnificent. They were doomed. "Enough of this melodrama," Natasha said sharply. "Time to end things." She placed her hands on Lysander's stasis chamber, and the crystal began to crack. But instead of releasing him, the breaks in the crystal allowed Natasha to reach inside, to touch Lysander's sleeping form directly. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The bonds connecting the cubs to the estate blazed with silver fire, and Harper felt their life force beginning to flow toward Natasha like water rushing through broken dams. "No!" Harper lunged forward, but Natasha's power was too strong. She could only watch helplessly as the children she loved began to die. That's when she saw it, one of Lysander's journals, fallen open to a page covered in diagrams and frantic notes. Her enhanced vision, sharpened by desperation, could make out the words even at a distance. The binding transfer requires willing acceptance of magical debt. No external force can impose the burden, it must be taken voluntarily. The original anchor point can shift responsibility by conscious choice, but only at the cost of their own life force. Harper's blood turned to ice as she understood. There was a way to break the bonds, but it required someone to willingly take on all the magical debt, all the pain, all the slowly draining life force, all the supernatural chains that held the cubs prisoner. It would kill whoever attempted it. The human body couldn't sustain that much magical energy for more than a few minutes. But a few minutes might be enough to set the cubs free. Harper looked up at her family, cold bleeding but still fighting, the cubs growing weaker by the moment, Stella's tiny voice calling for her mama, and made her choice. "Natasha," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady. "You want me to participate in the ritual? Fine. But we do it my way." Natasha's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you proposing?" "A binding transfer," Harper said, moving toward the center of the chamber. "From them to me. All of it. Every chain, every magical debt, every ounce of supernatural enslavement they've endured." "Impossible. The ritual requires..." "The ritual requires willing participation," Harper interrupted, drawing on Lysander's research. "And I'm willing. But not to help you kill them. To save them." Natasha's face went white as she realized what Harper was suggesting. "You'll die. The magical debt from 8 bound souls will tear you apart." "Probably," Harper agreed. "But they'll be free. And you'll lose your power source." "Harper, no." Cole's voice was rough with pain and desperation. He'd heard every word, understood exactly what she was proposing. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Harper said simply. "And you know it." She knelt in the center of the chamber, placing her hands flat on the stone floor. The magical symbols carved into the rock responded to her touch, beginning to glow with warm golden light instead of Natasha's cold silver. "I, Harper Sterling, daughter of Lysander Sterling, heir to this estate and all its burdens, do willingly accept the magical debt binding these children to this place." Her voice grew stronger with each word, power flowing through her like liquid fire. "I take their chains upon myself. I take their pain upon myself. I take their imprisonment upon myself." The effect was immediate. Harper felt the bonds connecting the cubs to the estate snap like breaking guitar strings, the magical chains transferring to her with force that drove her to her knees. Pain beyond description tore through her body as 8 lifetimes worth of magical debt settled into her bones. But it worked. Through her connection to the cubs, she felt their bonds dissolve, felt their strength returning as the magical drain on their life force ended. "You stupid girl!" Natasha shrieked, her careful composure finally cracking completely. "You've ruined everything." Harper tried to respond, but the pain was too intense. She could feel her life force being consumed by the magical debt, could feel her body beginning to shut down under the impossible strain. "Harper." Cole was beside her in an instant, gathering her into his arms. "Hold on, love. Just hold on. Love." He'd called her love. Had to, Harper gasped, tasting blood. Had to save them. "I know," Cole said, his voice breaking. "God, Harper, I know. And I love you for it. I love you so much it feels like dying." Harper managed a smile through the pain. At least she'd heard the words, even if she wouldn't live to treasure them. Around them, the chamber began to shake as Natasha's fury reached new heights. But there was something else, a different kind of magical disturbance, coming from the stasis chamber. "No, no, no," Natasha muttered, her hands flying over Lysander's crystal prison. "Not now. The timing isn't right, the energy levels aren't stable. Too late." The stasis chamber exploded in a shower of crystal shards and silver light, and Lysander Sterling sat up with the casual grace of someone waking from an afternoon nap. His amber eyes, so like Harper's own, surveyed the chaotic scene with mild interest. "Sister, dear," he said in a voice like poisoned honey. "What have you done to my beautiful daughter?" The magical chaos reached a crescendo as three different power sources clashed in the confined space. Natasha's centuries of accumulated energy, Harper's hybrid heritage burning itself out, and Lysander's fresh awakening created a supernatural storm that threatened to tear reality itself apart. But Harper barely noticed. She was focused on the warm weight of Cole's arms around her, on the knowledge that the cubs were free, on the certainty that she'd made the right choice even if it killed her. In the distance, she could hear Stella crying, and she tried to call out reassurance. But the darkness was closing in, and Harper Sterling, who'd spent a week learning what it meant to have a family worth dying for, finally let herself fall into the shadows. The last thing she heard was Lysander's cultured voice saying, "Now this is interesting," as if her potential death was nothing more than an amusing puzzle to solve. Chapter 8. Harper's point of view. Death felt like floating in warm honey, sweet, golden, and surprisingly peaceful. Harper drifted in the space between heartbeats, aware of voices calling her name but unable to respond. The magical debt that had been consuming her life force was still there, but somehow it felt different now. Less like chains dragging her down and more like roots spreading deep into rich earth. "Fascinating," came a voice she recognized but had never heard in person. Lysander's cultured tones carried an odd note of genuine wonder. "She's not dying, Natasha. She's transforming." "Impossible," Natasha spat, but Harper could hear the fear creeping into her voice. The magical debt should have killed her by now. No one can sustain that much supernatural energy. No one ordinary, perhaps, Lysander agreed. But my daughter was never meant to be ordinary. Harper felt consciousness beginning to return, drawn back by the desperate sound of Cole's voice calling her name. She opened her eyes to find herself still in his arms, but the basement chamber had changed again. The oppressive silver light was gone, replaced by something warmer and more welcoming. The magical symbols on the walls now pulsed with golden energy that felt like sunlight and safety. "Harper," Cole breathed, his dark eyes wide with relief. "Thank God. I thought I'd lost you." "Not that easy to get rid of me," Harper managed, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. She tried to sit up and gasped as power flowed through her, not the painful, consuming energy from before, but something clean and natural. Like breathing, or the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. "The bonds," she said, suddenly remembering. "The cubs, are they free?" "See for yourself," Lysander said, gesturing toward the basement stairs. Harper looked up to see 8 young faces peering down at her with expressions of wonder and joy. The cubs were glowing, literally glowing, with warm golden light that spoke of magical chains finally broken. But more than that, they looked renewed. Stronger. As if freeing them from Natasha's binding had given them back something essential they'd lost. Mama. Stella broke away from the others and came racing down the stairs, launching herself into Harper's arms. You're okay. You're okay. I'm okay, baby, Harper said, holding the little girl close. Through their physical contact, she could feel it, the new bond that connected them. Not the cold, controlling magic Natasha had woven, but something warm and chosen. Like golden threads of love and loyalty that could be strengthened or released at will. How? Natasha demanded, her elegant composure finally cracking. The ritual should have killed her. The magical debt should have destroyed her if she were trying to carry it alone, Lysander interrupted. But she's not alone, is she? Look at them, sister. Really look. Natasha's gaze swept over the cubs, and Harper saw her face go white with understanding. They're choosing to share the burden. They're feeding power back to her. Not feeding, Ethan corrected, speaking for the first time since the chaos began. Choosing. We're choosing to be her pack, to help her carry what needs carrying. That's what real family does. Harper felt tears sliding down her cheeks as the truth of it settled into her bones. She hadn't taken the cub's magical debt to die with it, she'd taken it to transform it. What had been chains of imprisonment had become bonds of chosen family, freely given and freely accepted. Impossible, Natasha whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Centuries of work, centuries of careful planning. Wasted, Lysander said simply. Because you never understood the most basic truth about power, dear sister. Magic drawn from fear and pain is always temporary. But magic rooted in love, that's eternal. Natasha's face twisted with rage and desperation. You sanctimonious fool. Love doesn't grant immortality. Love doesn't protect against time and death and loss. Doesn't it? Lysander looked at Harper and the cubs with something that might have been pride. Look at what my daughter has accomplished in a handful of days. Look at the family she's built from broken pieces. Tell me that's not a kind of immortality. Natasha raised her hands, silver light gathering around her fingers one last time. If I can't have eternal life, then no one can. I'll destroy them all before I let them mock centuries of my work. But when she tried to channel the power, nothing happened. The silver light flickered and died, leaving Natasha looking suddenly fragile and mortal. What's happening to me? Natasha's voice cracked with panic. The price of stolen power, Lysander said gently. It was never truly yours, Natasha. You borrowed it from the life force of others, and now that source has been cut off. Harper watched in fascination and horror as Natasha began to age before their eyes. The silver streaks in her hair spread until the entire mass turned white. Lines appeared around her eyes, her perfect posture began to stoop, and her flawless skin took on the papery texture of advanced age. No, Natasha gasped, looking down at her hands as liver spots appeared and spread. No, this isn't possible. I have safeguards, backups. You have nothing, Lysander said, his voice carrying a finality that made the chamber's walls ring like a bell. For 3 centuries, you've stolen years from others to extend your own life. Now time is collecting its debt with interest. Natasha opened her mouth to scream, but only dust emerged. Her body crumbled like ancient parchment, leaving nothing behind but a pile of gray ash and the memory of elegant cruelty. The silence that followed was profound. Harper found herself holding Stella tighter, as if the little girl's solid warmth could chase away the chill of witnessing such complete destruction. Is she really gone? Finn asked in a small voice. She's gone, Lysander confirmed. Her power is broken, her magic undone. The children she bound over the centuries have been freed, and the life force she stole has returned to where it belongs. Cole's point of view. Cole studied the man who had tormented his family for 3 years, searching for signs of the monster he'd come to destroy. But Lysander looked diminished. Still recognizably the elegant alpha from his portraits, but pale and somehow translucent, as if he were slowly fading from the world. You're dying, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Lysander smiled, and for the first time, the expression seemed genuinely warm. Yes. The stasis preserved my body but not my life force. I have perhaps an hour, maybe 2. Good, Cole said flatly. Cole, Harper said softly, but he shook his head. No, Harper. I know you want to see the best in everyone, but this man tortured children. He cursed me to spend half my life as a wolf because I tried to protect my siblings. He doesn't deserve your compassion. You're right, Lysander said quietly. I don't. What I did to you, to all of you, was unconscionable. I let my obsession with control, with creating the perfect supernatural society, turn me into the very monster I thought I was fighting against. Cole felt his wolf stir uneasily. This wasn't the arrogant, cruel alpha he'd expected to face. This was something else, someone broken and seeking redemption he had no right to expect. Why? Cole asked. Why bind children? Why turn them into magical batteries for Natasha's sick experiments? Lysander was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes, so like Harper's, distant with memory. Because I was terrified, he said finally. Terrified of losing everything I cared about the way I'd lost my parents, my first pack, everyone who'd ever mattered to me. I thought if I could create unbreakable bonds, if I could ensure absolute loyalty through magic, I could prevent that kind of loss from ever happening again. So you made us prisoners, Ethan said, his young voice heavy with years of pain. I made you safe, Lysander corrected, then shook his head. Or I told myself I was making you safe. In reality, I was just a frightened man trying to control the uncontrollable, and I became a monster in the process. Cole watched Harper struggle with the revelation, her compassionate nature warring with the reality of what Lysander had done. The cubs were clustered around her, seeking comfort and protection from the only stable adult they'd ever known. The curse, Cole said abruptly. Can you break it? Lysander looked at him with something that might have been regret. I could. But I suspect that won't be necessary much longer. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Lysander turned to Harper. Tell me, daughter, how do you feel? Has anything changed since you took on the cub's magical debt? Harper considered the question seriously. Everything feels deeper. More connected. I can sense each of them individually, feel their emotions, their health, their location even when they're not in sight. The alpha bond, Lysander said with satisfaction. You've become not just their protector, but their pack leader. A true alpha, not the artificial dominance I tried to create through magical compulsion. But Harper's an omega, Cole protested. Harper is whatever she chooses to be, Lysander corrected. Omega, Alpha, Witch, Werewolf, these are just labels. What matters is the connections she's forged, the family she's chosen to protect. Cole felt something shift inside him as understanding dawned. The restless energy that had plagued him since arriving at the estate, the constant need to fight and protect and defend, it was settling into something calmer. More focused. The curse is already breaking, he realized aloud. Lysander nodded. A curse cast to punish an alpha's defiance loses its power when that alpha willingly accepts the role of protector to someone stronger. You're not fighting the pack hierarchy anymore, Cole. You're embracing your place in it. As if to prove his point, Cole felt the familiar sensation of approaching transformation, but this time, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like choice. He could shift if he wanted to, remain human if he preferred. The magic was his to command, not the other way around. Why are you telling us this? Cole asked. Why help us after everything you've done? Lysander looked at Harper, and Cole saw genuine love in the dying man's eyes. Because she's everything I hoped she would be and nothing like what I feared. I wanted to create the perfect alpha through magical manipulation and careful breeding. Instead, I created something far more precious, a woman who chooses to protect others not because magic compels her, but because love demands it. Harper's eyes filled with tears. I can't forgive you for what you did to them, she said quietly. They were children, and you stole their childhood, their freedom, their sense of safety. I know, Lysander said simply. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for you to do what I couldn't, be better than your genetics would suggest. Be better than me. Harper's point of view. Harper felt Lysander's words settle into her heart like stones in deep water. This man, her biological father, the source of half her DNA, had caused immeasurable pain to the children she loved. But he was also dying, alone and filled with regret for choices that couldn't be undone. I won't be you, Harper said finally. I'll never use magic to force loyalty or create artificial bonds. These children will stay with me because they choose to, for as long as they choose to. And when they're ready to leave, to find their own paths, I'll help them go. I know you will, Lysander said, his voice growing fainter. That's why I'm proud to call you my daughter, even though I have no right to that pride. He turned to the cubs, who were watching the exchange with wide, wary eyes. I owe each of you an apology I can never adequately give. I stole your freedom, your sense of safety, your trust in adults who should have protected you. I can't undo that damage, but I can promise you this: my death will sever the last of the magical chains I placed on you. You'll be truly free to make your own choices. What about the estate? Ethan asked. What happens to this place? It belongs to Harper now, free and clear of all magical entanglements, Lysander said. She can do with it whatever she thinks best. Harper looked around at the cubs, her cubs now, by choice rather than magical compulsion, and felt certainty settle into her bones. We'll stay, she said. This place has been a prison, but it could be something else. A sanctuary. A safe haven for children who need one. A pack house, Cole added, moving to stand beside her. For kids who've lost their families or need protection from those who would hurt them. Stella tugged on Harper's sleeve. Will you really be our mama forever? Not because magic makes you, but because you want to. Harper knelt down to Stella's level, gathering the little girl into a fierce hug. For as long as you want me to be. All of you. You're my family now, the family I chose and the family who chose me back. Around them, the other cubs moved closer, creating a circle of warmth and belonging that felt more solid than any magical binding ever could. Lysander watched the tableau with peaceful eyes. You'll need to be careful, he warned. Natasha wasn't the only supernatural predator in the world. There will be others who see vulnerable children as easy prey. Let them come, Cole said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a wolf who'd found his true pack. They'll find us ready. Yes, Lysander said softly. I believe they will. He closed his eyes, and Harper felt the moment his life force finally gave out. There was no violence, no dramatic collapse, just a gentle fading, like a candle burning down to nothing. The man who'd caused so much pain simply stopped. Harper found herself surprisingly moved by his peaceful death. He'd been a monster, but he'd also been her father. And in the end, he'd tried to make amends for the harm he'd caused. What happens now? Zara asked, speaking for the first time since the battle ended. Harper looked around at her family, 8 children who'd survived hell and come out stronger, and 1 man who'd sacrificed everything to protect them. They were all looking at her with trust and love and the expectation that she'd know what came next. Surprisingly, she did. Cole's point of view. 3 months later, Cole stood on the mansion's renovated front porch and watched Harper direct the controlled chaos of 8 children preparing for their first full moon run as a free pack. The estate had been transformed, walls repaired, windows unboarded, rooms filled with laughter instead of fear. Finn, no shifting until we're all outside, Harper called as the 10-year-old began to sprout claws. You know the rules. But I'm excited, Finn protested, though he obediently pulled his claws back in. We all are, Harper said with a smile that made Cole's heart clench with love. But patience is part of being pack. She'd grown into her role as alpha with natural grace, leading through love and example rather than dominance. The children flourished under her care, their supernatural abilities returning stronger than ever without the magical bindings to suppress them. You're staring, Ethan observed, appearing beside Cole with the silent grace all the cubs had developed. Am I? Cole asked mildly. You always stare at her, Ethan continued. It's disgustingly romantic. At 16, Ethan had appointed himself the pack's unofficial guardian of propriety, despite the fact that he clearly approved of the relationship between his sister figure and brother figure. When are you going to make it official? Stella asked, having snuck up on Cole's other side with the stealth that made her the pack's best scout. Make what official? Cole asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. The mating ceremony, dummy, Rosa said, appearing with her twin Rico in tow. At 9, the twins had developed a disturbing ability to coordinate their mischief across large distances. We want a party, Rico added helpfully. With cake. And dancing, Rosa continued. And pretty lights like Harper made for Zara's birthday, Rico finished. Cole looked down at the expectant faces surrounding him and realized he was outnumbered. You've all been plotting, haven't you? Harper deserves a proper ceremony, Ethan said seriously. She saved us. She chose us. She deserves to know that someone chose her back, officially and in front of everyone. I choose her every day, Cole said quietly. But she doesn't know that, Stella said with 6-year-old wisdom. Sometimes grown-ups are stupid about saying important things out loud. Cole couldn't argue with that logic. He'd been thinking about the mating ceremony for weeks, had even spoken to the local supernatural council about making their bond officially recognized. But something had held him back, the fear that Harper might feel pressured, that she might think he was moving too fast. What if she says no? Cole asked, voicing his deepest fear. The Cubs exchanged looks that suggested they thought he might actually be stupid. Cole, Zara said with 14-year-old exasperation, she lights up like a Christmas tree every time you walk into a room. She curls up against you during movie nights even when there's plenty of space on the couch. She lets you steal food off her plate. That last one is true love, Logan added solemnly. Harper never shares her dessert with anyone else. Before Cole could respond, Harper's voice called from the lawn. Everyone ready? The moon's almost at its peak. Cole looked up to see her standing in a pool of silver moonlight, her face radiant with joy and anticipation. She'd braided flowers into her dark hair, Stella's suggestion, and wore a simple dress that flowed around her like water. She looked like a fairy tale come to life, like every dream he'd never dared to have. Actually, Cole said, making a decision that felt as natural as breathing, there's something I need to do first. He walked down the porch steps and across the lawn to where Harper stood waiting. The Cubs followed, arranging themselves in a loose circle around the two adults with the instinctive understanding that something important was about to happen. Harper, Cole began, then stopped. All the words he'd practiced, all the speeches he'd rehearsed, seemed inadequate for this moment. Yes? Harper asked, her amber eyes warm with curiosity. I love you, Cole said simply. I love your strength and your compassion and the way you turned a house of horrors into a home full of laughter. I love how you sing off-key in the shower and how you always give the Cubs extra dessert when you think I'm not looking. I love that you chose us, all of us, even when it meant giving up the life you'd planned. Harper's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Cole. I'm not finished, Cole said, dropping to one knee on the moonlit grass. I love that you see the best in everyone, even broken alphas with trust issues and anger management problems. I love that you made me believe in pack bonds and chosen family and the possibility of happily ever after. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring he'd commissioned from a supernatural craftsman in town, white gold set with a stone that captured moonlight, and held it, just like Harper captured hearts and held them safe. Harper Sterling, Cole said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, will you be my mate? Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you and the family we've built together? Harper's answer was to drop to her knees in front of him, framing his face with her hands. Yes, she said, her voice thick with tears and laughter. Yes, you ridiculous man. Of course, yes. The kiss that followed was witnessed by 8 cheering children and blessed by the light of the full moon. When they finally broke apart, Harper was wearing the ring and Cole was wearing a smile that felt like it might never fade. Can we have the ceremony next month? Stella asked, apparently having given this considerable thought. I want to pick flowers for decorations. And we need to invite the Hendersons, Ethan added, referring to the family of displaced werewolf cubs who'd arrived at the estate just last week. Their kids should see what a proper pack celebration looks like. Harper and Cole exchanged glances over the cubs' heads. In the 3 months since Natasha's defeat, word had spread through the supernatural community about the sanctuary they'd created. Children who'd lost their families, teens who'd been rejected by traditional packs, young supernaturals who simply needed a safe place to figure out who they were, they all seemed to find their way to Blackthorne Estate. Their pack was growing, and Harper couldn't be happier about it. Next month sounds perfect, Harper said, standing and helping Cole to his feet. But right now, we have a moon run to complete. And I believe someone mentioned racing to the old oak tree. The cubs whooped with excitement, beginning their transformations in the careful, controlled way Harper had taught them. Soon the lawn was filled with wolves of various sizes, all looking expectantly at their alpha and her mate. Harper shifted last, her golden wolf form striking in the moonlight. She nuzzled against Cole's darker coat, a gesture of affection and acceptance that made his heart swell with happiness. Then they were running, the whole pack streaming across the estate's moonlit grounds like a river of joy and freedom. They were family, they were home, and they were finally, completely free. Behind them, the mansion stood proud and welcoming, its windows glowing with warm light, a beacon for any lost child who might need sanctuary. Harper had kept her promise to transform the estate from a prison into a haven, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure it remained a place where love triumphed over fear. As they reached the forest's edge, Harper threw back her head and howled, not in pain or fear, but in pure, boundless joy. Her pack joined their voices to hers, their song echoing across the mountains with the promise of new beginnings and the certainty of love that would last forever. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and adventures and children who would need their protection. But whatever came next, they would face it together, a pack forged in fire and bound by choice, stronger than any magic and more precious than any treasure. They were home. Epilogue. 1 year later. Harper stood in the kitchen of Blackthorne Estate, now officially renamed Haven House, watching the controlled chaos of a household full of supernatural children preparing for their weekly packed dinner. The mansion's kitchen had been completely renovated, expanded to accommodate what had grown from 8 cubs to nearly 20 young supernaturals who'd found their way to their door. Finn, stop trying to season the salad with magic, Harper called without turning around, her supernatural senses picking up the telltale shimmer of power being misused. We've talked about this. But it tastes better when I add a little enhancement spell, 12-year-old Finn protested, though she heard him obediently put down his hands. And what have I told you about enhancement spells on food? That they're a crutch for people who don't want to learn to cook properly, Finn recited with exaggerated disappointment. But Harper, your cooking is already perfect. I was just trying to make the vegetables taste as good as your pot roast. Harper smiled, turning to ruffle Finn's dark hair. In the year since their freedom, all the original cubs had grown, not just physically, but emotionally. Finn had discovered a talent for elemental magic that complemented his werewolf abilities. Ethan, now 17, had become her unofficial second-in-command, helping to manage the increasingly complex logistics of their growing family. The twins, Rosa and Rico, had developed into the pack's early warning system, their ability to sense newcomers from miles away proving invaluable. And Stella, sweet Stella, had blossomed into a confident 7-year-old who served as the official welcomer for new arrivals, her innocent joy helping traumatized children feel safe in their first days at Haven House. Harper. A new voice spoke from the kitchen doorway. Mrs. Chen. Harper turned to see Megan, one of their newest residents. 14 years old, the girl had arrived 3 weeks ago after her pack was killed by hunters. She was still jumpy, still prone to nightmares, but Harper could see her beginning to heal. Just Harper, sweetheart, Harper said gently. What can I do for you? Ethan said I should ask you about the education program? I missed a lot of school before I came here, and I don't want to fall behind. Harper's heart clenched with familiar protectiveness. Each child who came to them carried their own scars, their own fears, their own dreams that needed nurturing back to life. Of course, Harper said. We have tutors who work with kids at all levels, and several of our older residents are excellent teachers. Zara's particularly good with mathematics, and Logan knows more about literature than some college professors. Megan's face lit up with the first genuine smile Harper had seen from her. Really? I love reading, but I haven't had access to many books. Then you'll love our library, Finn said enthusiastically. Cole had them rebuild it last month, and now it has sections for everything: supernatural history, fiction, magic theory, even comic books. Comic books? Megan asked, a hint of childhood wonder creeping into her voice. Tons of them, Finn confirmed. Stella's particularly fond of the ones with flying superheroes. Harper watched Megan's posture relax slightly, saw the moment she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be safe here. It was a transformation Harper had witnessed dozens of times over the past year, and it never stopped filling her with awe and gratitude. Megan, Harper said gently, why don't you go find Zara? I think she's in the study hall helping some of the younger kids with their homework. You can see what the education program looks like, and if you're comfortable, maybe join in. Megan nodded eagerly and hurried off, her step lighter than it had been since her arrival. She's getting better, Finn observed, echoing Harper's thoughts. They all do, eventually, Harper said. It just takes time and patience and love. And good food, Finn added solemnly. Speaking of which, your pot roast smells amazing. Harper laughed, checking the oven. 30 more minutes. Why don't you go tell everyone dinner will be ready soon? Finn bounded off with the energy of a young werewolf who felt completely safe in his territory. Harper took a moment to savor the quiet, listening to the sounds of her home, laughter from the living room, someone practicing piano in the music room Cole had added, the gentle murmur of conversation from the study hall. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and Harper leaned back against her mate's solid chest. The mating ceremony 6 months ago had been everything the Cubs had promised: beautiful decorations, dancing under the stars, and enough cake to feed a small army. But more than the ceremony itself, Harper treasured the daily reality of being mated to Cole Riverside. Good day? Cole asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Very good, Harper said, turning in his arms. Megan asked about the education program, and I think she's ready to start integrating with the group activities. That's progress, Cole agreed. And the Jenkins family? Harper smiled. The twins are already calling Stella their little sister, and their parents are interested in the pack dynamics workshop you suggested. I think they're going to fit in perfectly. The Jenkins family represented something new for Haven House, an intact werewolf family who'd sought them out not because of tragedy, but because they'd heard about the community Harper and Cole were building. Parents who wanted their children to grow up around other supernatural kids, to learn pack dynamics in a healthy environment rather than the often harsh traditional structures. Speaking of fitting in, Cole said, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief, Stella has a question for you. Oh no, Harper said with mock dread. What kind of question? The kind that involves whether we're planning to give her any baby brothers or sisters anytime soon. Harper felt heat flood her cheeks. She and Cole had talked about children, of course they had, but with the sanctuary growing so rapidly, they'd agreed to wait until things stabilized. What did you tell her? Harper asked. That it was a grown-up decision that grown-ups make together, Cole said diplomatically. But I may have also mentioned that we're not opposed to the idea. Cole Riverside, Harper said, trying to sound stern despite the warmth spreading through her chest. Are you trying to tell me something? I'm trying to tell you that I love you, Cole said simply. I love the family we've built, the home we've created, the way you make broken children believe in safety again. And if you want to add to that family in a more traditional way, I'd be honored to help. Harper stood on her toes to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope for the future into the gesture. When they broke apart, she was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. Happy tears, she assured him quickly. Very, very happy tears. Is that a yes? Cole asked softly. That's a yes, Harper confirmed. Maybe not right away, but, yes. I want it all, Cole. The sanctuary, the cubs we already have, and babies of our own to add to the chaos. Cole's smile was brilliant enough to power the entire mansion. Stella's going to be insufferable when she finds out she was right about us wanting kids. She already is insufferable, Harper pointed out. But in the most wonderful way. A crash from the dining room interrupted them, followed by Ethan's voice calling, "It's okay. Nobody's hurt. But we might need a new chandelier." Harper and Cole looked at each other and burst into laughter. "Welcome to parenthood," Cole said, grabbing Harper's hand. "Shall we go see what disaster our children have created now?" "Our children," Harper repeated, loving the sound of it. "All of them." They walked hand in hand toward the dining room, where 20 young voices were already launching into explanations, accusations, and requests for help cleaning up whatever had been broken. Harper could see Ethan directing the cleanup with the authority of a future alpha, while Stella stood on a chair trying to reach the crystals that had fallen from the chandelier. "Family meeting after dinner," Harper announced, and the room fell silent. "And before anyone panics, no one's in trouble. Cole and I just have some news to share." The cubs, all of them, from 7 to 17, looked at each other with the kind of anticipatory excitement that told Harper they'd figured out exactly what kind of news it might be. "Are we getting a baby?" Stella asked with the directness that only a 7-year-old could manage. "Eventually," Harper said, and the room erupted in cheers. As Cole helped her set the table for their weekly family dinner, Harper looked around at the faces of the children they'd saved and who had, in turn, saved them. This was what love looked like, messy and loud and absolutely perfect. This was what home meant, not a place, but people who chose each other every single day. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere out there, other lost children were still searching for safety, for family, for hope. And Harper knew that tomorrow, or next week, or next month, some of them would find their way to Haven House. She and Cole would be ready for them. They would always be ready. After all, they were in the business of creating families, building hope, and proving that love, chosen, fought for, and freely given, was the strongest magic of all. This was their inheritance, not property or power, but the knowledge that home wasn't something you were born into. It was something you built, one rescued heart at a time. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe, like and share for more.